Is this being live streamed or something? Yeah. Oh. So people can see me right now? Yeah.
Well, because the way the room is set up, yeah. Can I get your verbal authorization that we can put you on air?
First, let me check myself out.
The fleet is effective.
I go to the bathroom. I'm a little bit greasy.
Would you prefer an email chain?
We can do email chain.
I don't know see this shit call.
We can do email chain. I guess we give you the email since there's no cards in the one.
Yeah, that's
right.
Do we have your emails? Do we do a flash drive?
It's knowledge.
We did emails last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
We did emails last year.
Remember, mine is knowledge is salt. It is like the name, Devon Murphy.
Yeah, I got this.
Why do I call you today?
I don't know, right? Like, damn.
What's yours?
My name is Devon.Murphy at Gmail.
But it's spelled today.
It is spelled Devane. My mother just doesn't have the correct grammar sometimes.
I'm mad he had the napkin.
I'm good now.
Oh, good.
You got another 2 minutes or so. You wanted to write the underview on your papers so that you would keep looking at the computer every time, or do you just go by heart?
There's an underview.
Here, you did. Here. So much.
You have to ask the kids how we made an argument like that today. Yeah. Yeah. You have to You have to Coach Vermont. We go, yeah, didn't you use the Coach Vermont? Yeah. Can't be that good.
Is the one that says, can I look at it?
Nice. I do good, Jackie.
Oh, yeah, that's.
I mean, Jackie from Jake. Nice.
Okay. So I gotta go.
I mean, yeah, couple that take.
You rolling?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, I'm not saying still prep off in the code.
If you don't just click don't consent, do consent.
Okay. I made a while to see how this is going.
And then you can, while you're doing stuff, you just said you have them. I have them from you. Thank you so much.
Wait, is this live stream or you're doing post it later on?
Oh,
It's live,
Really?
but it'll also be later. You'll have access to it.
Would you mind telling me how my friend can access? My mama said she wanted to see
Hi, Mommy.
Oh, you want the link? The link is on the CETO website, but you could also.
Just text it to her real quick.
I'm trying to think of the most cliche thing to say while I'm on camera.
Rolling.
Probably didn't.
You did your homework?
I didn't do it.
I didn't do it. Shout out.
Mom, I love you. Shout out to Uncle Willie, Pop, Sonny, Uncle Ray Ray. There's no Uncle Ray Ray. I just wanted to say.
Jay.
Siani, I love you. Jay. Oh my God, my family gonna see this.
Okay, good enough.
Did you get the dot in the YouTube?
Yeah, in between the YouTube. Well, let me just send this to like 3-4
When
people.
somebody trying to hire me in 2 years, they gonna see this. My grandma gonna be like, "This what you do at school?" Why that sign that Facebook?
I do.
All right.
I'll be right.
Good. All right. I just wanted to be known that white people are hilarious. So last topic we had the I already see this coming. So like last topic we had like the war topic. So we talked about peaceful things like militarization and all that. But then now this topic, I heard that we was talking about weed, and I was like, bet. I grew up in Camden. I'm currently living in Newark because of Rutgers. I'm around people who do topical research all the time. But the thing is, I didn't figure out that there were other parts of the topic until I actually got into like the debate community, because that's where like people started talking about other things like suicide and other forms of anti-black violence. Anyway, so the thing is, I was never really around white people who debated because of my squad. Let me clarify. There were two white people on the squad. There was one girl, her name was Hannah, but she's down with the brown, so it's different. Like she would get up and be like, "Yeah, we read poetry and that disrupts anti-blackness and framework is racist," which is different from like teams like Liberty who read anti-racial against us. So it was weird. It was weird to like expect that. And then the other white dude, his name was Aaron, but like the thing is, all he would do was like read Baudrillard and psychoanalysis. So like he would get up and one day he look at the judge and be like, "Fuck everything." Like there were no warrants. It was just like it wasn't peaceful. So then I realized that I was not able to prepare for what white teams were saying in relation to the topic. So the first team I hit, they were marijuana act, surprise, and they said something along the lines of, "Yeah, we need to legalize marijuana because of Mexican drug cartels." And I was like, "Whoa, tell me why the only time we talk about brown folks is when they engage in the forms of violence." And it was like, you know what? Fiat solves for our racist interpretation of them. We backed that ass, of course. But then there was a round after that where they were talking about legalization of marijuana, saying that the legalization of marijuana solves for global warming. And I was like, what kind of inconvenient truth is this? This sounds like this NYC sounds like Al Gore got on a plane with Snoop Dogg, and when it was like they passed bowls and decided to do that's not acceptable. So then I realized that the reason that all this was happening was because fiat is stupid. I mean, it's nice if you go to Staples and like you see a red button and you push it and it's like, that was easy. And then it's refreshing. But I'm tired of seeing that happen in debate rounds. Like, I'll be like, ask them literally defend the status quo. Be like, what does that solve? And they'll be like, oh, it solves for everything. I'm like, how? I'm like, it does. And the judge be like, yeah, you're right. It's like, how bad is fiat? What's fiat like?
Yeah, fiat is like a crackhead fever dream. When he used to walk up on the street, he's like, "Yeah, you could imagine as soon as you sign a piece of paper, you could back the fuck up, man. I don't know what you're talking about, man. Back up, man."
Yo, how is your funny? So then I was like, you know what? I just got tired of white people who use fiat to justify racism in rounds. So I was like, maybe we need some culture about this shit. So the topic is also fucked up, and I think that's kind of why fiat gets realized in these particular ways. So say, for example, organ sales, right? I think his name was Kendrick Johnson.
Yeah.
They found, as a black man, they found out like he was losing like a heart and like liver and like and all these places where his organs should have been. They stuffed his body parts with newspapers. And me personally, I think they should have realized something was wrong when like they asked him how he was doing and he started like saying what the headlines were for that day. I mean that like I say, it's real quick, but black humor kind of messed that. Oh, black humor. I'm like, okay. And then I realized that it wasn't just that part of the topic, but it was also the what's the name? The suicide part of the topic. So, for example, especially in the round where like there's like explicit systems for anti-blackness that lead to like I don't know like things like microaggressions that make it hard to live and be black in the world, or there are things like felon disenfranchisement. It's weird to like there be people react and they be like, yeah, physician-assisted suicide solves for neoliberalism, but what about the black folks that will be targeted by this? I mean, we already know black people get over medicated in schools by their like pediatricians. So I remember a teacher said I was hyper one day and that I actually had Ritalin. I had Pop Rocks. What makes you think that we can handle the legalization of physician-assisted suicide? I know exactly what's going to happen. I saw Scrubs several times. JD and Turk were funny. What's going to happen is somebody's going to go in for like somebody's going to go in, and then the intern who's fresh out of med school, they're going to do the injection. And they're like, I'm sorry you decided to take this route, but You'll be out here very peacefully and quickly. They're like, hold on, I just wanted to check on. I know that civil society is not ready for that sort of accountability. But then I realized that there's something about this particular interaction of marijuana, which you just put this industrial complex, physician-assisted suicide, and organ cells that's pretty anti-black. Did you know that in China there are prisons where, like, say, 100 deaths are on like paper, but there are far more than that being carried out covertly? Because much like my computer, a lot of things are made in China. One of them are like organs. A lot of especially political prisoners are being killed off the records and having their organs, like their heart sold for, like, say, $100,000, intestines sold for like $1,100,000. And I didn't know you could sell intestines, but hey, that shit happens. Especially considering that there was a video of a black guy being choked out in the United States, and people thought that police officer was enforcing justice. I'm sorry, but I don't trust that these things can be legalized without there being anti-black violence. And people usually say, don't worry about that. The reason that happens is because of the war on drugs. But America's very creative. I know what's going to happen. Marijuana is going to be legalized in about 2 weeks. There's going to be a picture that surfaces on World Star Hip Hop where Obama is in Cuba with Wiz Khalifa smoking a pound of OG Kush. After that happens, sure, the war on drugs is going to be over, but because of the momentum from Michelle Obama's healthy lunch food campaigns, there's going to be a war on obesity. And 2 things are going to happen. Devon's diet is going to be the first casualty. And secondly, there's going to be a criminalization of all snack foods. I'm talking all the good stuff, all the things that he was raised on: Ho-Ohs, Cheetos, sugar water. Not like the 50-cent water. It's literally sugar that he put water in. I've seen it. It's crazy. And it's fucked up because I can imagine it now. People think I would be crazy if I was to say that in the future, black bodies would be like hunted down because like having like Skittles and like bean pies. But I think that one of those things happened already. I'm very suspicious of the law, and I think I have pretty good reason to do so. But with that said, that's enough about the topic. Let's talk about the team, specifically this nigga. Tell me why he got one big titty and one little titty, so they call him Biggie Smalls. Vaughn got the nutritional value of Big Macs tattooed on the left side of his stomach. See, right? Savon, when he was younger, he grew up in a time where debate people would carry like most of their arguments in binders, but he never had that problem because he would just hide his arguments in his cleavage.
You know what you would hide your debate arguments?
What?
In them folds in the back of your head.
Listen, that's not my fault.
You got multiple manila folders coming out the back of your scalp. You talking about intestines earlier. The only intestines in this round is in the back of your skull.
Yo, tell me why you look like Ditto was confused if he should look like Lickitung or Snorlax.
Why do you look like Geodude in the face?
Yo, your shirt looked like a Crips picnic table.
Why your shirt made a corner?
Nah, pause. Run that shit back. Yo,
why is your shirt made a corner?
Look like
if you move too fast, that shit gonna sound like you brushing the car. Fuck out of here.
That sounds like you when you snore. But tell me why Devon don't look like a default mannequin for the big and tall section of Sears.
You just mad that you bought your outfit at the Salvation Army.
Yeah, you're right. But still, beyond my wonderful fashion choices, humor is a good way to interrogate things that you normally consider to be normal. For example, the colorblindness of this topic is something that we need to have a legitimate discussion of far before we have like any discussion of like what the best type of legalization would be. We need to consider how we whitewash topic, how we whitewash discussions of policy before those policies even begin. And I think that humor is a good way to interrogate the internal presuppositions that go into how we think about the law and race's relationship to it.
Right. So the app says you're a prerequisite to things like legalization on the topic. So 1AC doesn't say whether legalization is good or bad, right?
No, legalization is probably bad.
Okay, so good.
Well,
Okay.
legalization.
So why vote affirmative?
The one seems kind of funny, and we should interrogate.
Yeah, sure. So why is like Rashad's ballot necessary to say you're funny? Like you're funny.
It's not that it's necessary to say you're funny. He probably should just vote because we're funny and that we made him laugh. I mean, there's a couple other things reasons why he should vote.
Okay,
You know?
yeah, sure.
I mean, if you lean that way, you might be able to hit an RFD.
I already heard the argument.
Okay. So you say things like fiat is bad because, for example, of like the warming debate or the marijuana debate you have. Why does fiat necessarily have to? Why can't we have debates that focus on things like solvency advocates or the material impacts that things like legalization could have?
Isn't that
When do we conclude that?
No, yeah. So then why couldn't you have an advocacy on the topic that talked about a specific solvency system that could be beneficial for minorities?
Wouldn't that still use fiat? I don't understand why any.
Yeah, no. So why is that?
use
Like,
fiat.
why are your examples in the one you see about stuff intrinsic to fiat then?
What do you mean? Why are they intrinsic to fiat?
Like, why are the examples why fiat is bad, not why those specific teams are just like bad at debate?
No, fiat is bad.
Yeah, why is fiat bad?
Because the idea that when Rashad,
The idea that we can just wave a wand and have a judge sign a ballot.
Yeah, why can't we have
racism is
intricate
something that we
debates
can
about
tolerate.
solvency advocates so we can learn something about the way legal action can be effective?
Learning doesn't happen in debate rounds. It's just the race to nuclear war impacts.
Yeah, why do we have to have a race to reward impact?
We don't,
Verbally
which is
reads-
why we use the 1AC to
Okay,
interrogate the debate more.
Fair enough. You talk about things like anti-blackness. I guess what is the 1AC's definition of what anti-blackness is?
We don't. You don't have to bring out your Buddhism blocks. Like,
No,
we're not-
I'm just like confused. There are a bunch of authors who talk about anti-blackness in different ways. What's the 1AC's relationship to it?
We look at historical practices that have existed, and we think that there is systemic racism. We think that we should be able to talk about racism in a space where we're supposed to.
Is it something that is endemic to institutions or something that is like coincidentally
What does that mean?
like are institutions inevitably anti-black? Like the
I don't think I said that.
No, yeah, that's a question I'm asking. Do you think that?
I don't think I said that.
inevitably anti-black, like can
Yeah.
they be ever changed?
Yeah, can
I
institutions be
mean,
changed?
yes, they can be changed.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, topic is colorblind. I guess what would a non-colorblind approach to the topic?
That's not what we said.
No, yeah, you say status quo
You should be able
approaches.
to hear a little bit better.
No,
brother.
yeah, I'm listening. Status quo, you
I'm for
said
ears, brother. Just saying.
they're big ears, so they should be able to listen. But yeah,
They should.
status quo, you say that a lot of people approach the topic.
No, we say the topic
colorblind.
itself is colorblind.
Yeah, wait, how is the topic itself colorblind?
Because they ignores the fact that when you
I had a round before this one. People were they read a Zizek path. They were talking about like organs without bodies, but forgot to mention that organs are attached to people.
Okay,
I think that's a pretty good example of how like focus on just organs of another stuff excludes lived experiences.
sounds good.
I just sent it out. The order will be one off in case.
Here's it.
You're good?
I got it. This one will be good.
Okay. Anyone not ready?
I'm good.
Our interpretation is that the affirmative should have to instrumentally defend the institutional implementation of a topical plan. It's the most predictable. The ancient and verb indicated debate about hypothetical government acts in Erickson. And for each topic contains an agent who's acting in the U.S. and the U.S. should adopt the policy. The agent is adopting the verb should or just an action should adopt means the policy and action through governmental means the specification of direction of limitation of the action desired. The entire debate is about whether or not something ought to occur if legalized is to make an illegal act lawful. Black's Law Dictionary in 95 to make lawful to confirm or validate what was before unlawful to add authority of law to that which before was against the law. B is the violation. The act doesn't defend a topical plan. C is reason to prefer. One is vote neg on presumption because they have not offered a reason why you should accept some parametric of the topic. Two is topical fairness requirements are key to effective dialogue. Monopolizing strategy and prep makes the discussion one-sided and subverts any meaningful negative role. Galloway and seven debates the dialogue is about the topic requirements when competitive equity suffers. It's nice person of the other participant is the fundamental condition of a dialogue far from now request for links fairness is the demand for respect. The some amounts of preparation not be silent in the cases that suspend fairness exclude strategies one side unable to participate that they competence for the exigencies of the world by offering a framework that maintains maintains quality for the sake of conversation in case, defend neither the state nor action yet claim to be germane to the topic for the act, for any meaningful role for the negative, undermining the value of the exchange of many substitutes for topical action do not accrue to dialogical benefits. 3 is policy debate is good for education, engagement, and empathy. Clear rules, a stable topic, institutional role playing, and simulation are integral to the process. Atlantis in simulations, games, and role play represent active teaching and learning, deepening and conceptual understanding. So sets of interactions, social political process by using student interaction to bring abstract concepts to provide students with real or imaginary the active situation, enable students to experience constraints and motivation for action experienced by real players. Simulations take place in competition. Role plays provide for or leeway for the students to think about how they might act when placed in a position of well-defined persona. Experts recommend building the simulation design around specific objectives and selecting the topic, establishing roles, providing clear role-specific instruction and background material, and having debriefing and assessment plans in place are effective in bridging the gap between academic knowledge and everyday life. Such experiences are lead to empathy and acquisition of knowledge. 4 is through discussing passive government action debate teaches us to be better organizational decision-making. Learning about the uniquely different considerations of organizations is key to affecting change in a world overwhelmingly dominated by institutions. Also, in 11 governments matter, organizations matter. Nothing of greater importance is ever accomplished by a single person. Pick your favorite historical figure, and I can guarantee their greatest success. Greatest part of an organization, a well-run organization makes better decisions, learns from its mistakes and structures, to promote better goals, to promote its goals or greatest challenges, or managerial and organizational rather than the technical. The greatest opportunities and leverage points lie in how we run our organizations. We give short shrift to the question about how organizations actually turn fun into technical solutions, and the app cannot access its meta consensus is key to actualize pluralism. Drives it. So its meta consensus should be desirable on the grounds of deliberative economy. That is to the extent to which a set of beliefs is accepted as relevant. There is an understanding of what the main issues are, so no need to debate the fundamentals of paradigm features and epistemic meta consensus, releasing practitioners from the sheer amount of time and effort to beyond debating basic assumptions and epistemic meta consensus for bits of pluralism at the single level. The simple level required for complex issues to be scrutinized from a number of directions in the search for creative solutions that respond to different facets of issues and the impact that ways deliberative debate models in part by evidence skills vital to respond to existential threats. Slumberg and the democratic capacities built by debate are critical thinking and analysis of public claims informed by decision making, better public judgment of the political life that underwrites a critique of debate is a pessimistic view of the bureaucratic and insular politics. The puzzling solution to the warrant giving on debate citizens' capacities can change, which is a reason theorists have put a high premium on education. Debate builds skills that allow debate builds skills that allow research that decision to impact them and evaluate evidence for arguments of an increasingly information-rich environment and priorities of political energies, feelings. Universities that they have not changed curriculum to match what challenges a new information environment is problems of future citizenry that will need to make evaluated choices against increasingly complex environment. It did not matter which topic students have been assigned like Largan's studies still substantiate practicing the debate, like a critical role in problem solving skills. Evidence warrants strong support for the debate is in enhancing democratic deliberative capacities, combination critical thinking, info processing, and capabilities for thoughtful and open engagement argues that the debate is a very crucial component of rich democratic life and unmatched for creating self-critical students, something meaningful political engagement and new articulations of democratic life. The more that can engage the process, the more likely we are to produce revisions of democratic life and necessary democracies to drive democracy facing challenges including class, gender, and racial justice, environmental destruction, climate intervention, and conflict. More than any specific proposal, citizenry deliberates with greater skill, provides the best hopes for existential challenges. 5 is refusal to engage in institutional reform reduces inquiry to narcissism. There's a direct trade-off with productive discussion and research. Chandler in mind, rejection of realist frameworks has not been uses of theoretical engagement with realism, but an ethical action of rejection of realism's ontological focus. Our ideas say more about us and the world we live in. The most interest trends taken up critical theory and argue that focusing on the world as it exists and conservative problem solving, while the task for critical theorists is to focus on emancipatory alternative forms of thinking. Critical thought has become a process of wishful thinking rather than engagement. This becomes research rather than research. Politics has become less an activity based on social engagement and testing of ideas in debate or the academy. When we look at meaning, we find it inside ourselves rather than the external consequences of our political acts. The more we engage in politics, the less we engage instrumentally with the outside world and the level of the political debate and organization. 6 is topic education. Detailed debate on government policy regarding crime is key to legalizing the penal system. The impact of sustained inequality. Barker and the public needs to become more involved in crime control policy. That relationship is dependent on political considerations, deliberative discussion. Ordinary people can support more rational, pragmatic response given the opportunity to debate. Range policy proposals learn from experts that hold policymakers accountable so they can make informed decisions about crime control policy. We extend the findings from case studies, and it may be a de-democratization, the retrenchment of American democracy that accounts for high rates of imprisonment. Americans have retreated to the private sphere. That weakens political support to sustain inclusive public policies. Undemocratized policies likely reaffirms our authority through the criminal law and penal sanctioning. Penal sanctioning is visible, forceful, and brutal. Reformers can take advantage of the particular political moment and offers a rare opportunity for change. State governments may have forced to rethink their approaches. Many are coming to realize imprisonment tended to generate more social problems. When crime rates are down, by being cognizant of how individual environments from friend policy debates, reformers can develop proposals that resonate rather than repel officials. Reformers can use institutional environments to change existing policies. 7 is only debates about engaging institutions promote social change, disengagement from politics, fractures coalitions, and reinforces conservatism. Move 9. There is emphasis on critiques which others seek represented politics of the press with attitude to engage, seek to get rid of the member hegemonic order, is susceptible to be challenged by counter-hegemonic practices. We have no other choice than to engage in hegemonic practices to challenge them if we do not lead the state control systems of the authority regulation with elected which shows little interest right groups or have to take over the state of successful hegemony faces meaning the institutions social practices such as the result is always contingent politics in place in a field crisscrossed by antagonists of the properly political intervention. In cases a certain aspect of existing hegemony counter-hegemonic practices are an ensemble of differences all coming together. The adversary is contingent upon circumstances that can only be done by establishing links between social movements, political parties, and unions. Now, the case attaching your affect to the ballot replicates the policies of liberalism. This means the 1AC is not a reason to vote after launch. In 11, there is no avoiding the noise versus which skirt the filter points to desire for the political he wants the public to feel. The desires to make the message affectively binding. Public's binding is best achieved by the affective feeling together. The transmission performs an attachment, a sustaining relation. The attachment produces a sense of shared world, a sense of purpose, whatever the claim may public bring the circulation of affective binding converts a world to a space of moral action. This look into desire and an alternative commonness in the present. Circulate without mediation. The contemporary human filtered serious transference news by crisis in which life seems to be reduced. Discussions about tactics for survival and who is to blame. The filter impresses upon itself a mass consciousness of as an ethical crisis. Uncertainty is the material that Bush wished to bracket his desire for a politics of ambient noise sought to display sensibility. He banished cultivated opinion from the Bush's feeling was to separate the political from policies. He would cast antagonism into the epiphenomenal. When Bush uttered his desire for affective communication, he was trying to distract from the public gaze from his actions that he has many bedfellows who prefer to intimate assemblies for this embodied identification that constitutes public. He joins antagonists to provide the feeling of solidarity by establishing an affective register of belonging. Public spheres are always affect towards one senses of the matters of survival lives that you just perform to listen and to be interested. They do not have to blend and do anything to belong. Freedom includes freedom from no one is obliged to be socially active and belonging. Sociality is another name for the desire for the political. This line attachment to the political can amount to a cruel optimism, and optimistic attachment is cruel. The object desires an obstacle to fulfilling the very ones that bring people to it. In the relation of cruel optimism, when despite an awareness political sphere, here's the statistics based for activity among the least among members of the body policy. Return voting is one thing, collective caring, listening, and scanning the airwaves or others. All these are modes of orientation from our attachment to the system, confirm the system. The affects to make one feel bound to the repetition of depressed position that seeks to repair can be split. Optimism from the expectation of demand, fair, cost fidelity to the political without exception. Recognition of profoundly ethical political solidarities and structures. Strong solidarity requires skills for adjudicating incremental visions for a better good, like the atrophy of these skills that average when politics is reduced. Affective attunement, splitting off political optimism from the way things are, can sustain many kinds of the cruelest optimism, and claiming there is a truth or meaning. There can be performance replicates epistemological authoritarianism of the status quo hemmings, and by the affect, and placing individual in circuit of feeling and response rather than opposition. We all develop affect as a way of negotiating the world as individuals. One reason affect has taken up the alternative determinism instead of positioning of the individual as possessing control over their future. To lose proposes a meaning appears in interpretation, confounding its logic and scrambling its expectations. One cannot do justice to the body by reducing it to its organization. To lose proposes a cartographic approach where the body, where the focus is its placement between the states, and part of what makes it the theory so uninventive. Market theory so uninventive.
Okay. You good?
What's affect?
Affect is it's distinct from the sort of emotional response that we feel to something, but it's sort of the
How we move with the way that the body or the way that things can produce movements or motivations.
Okay, in English, what is affect?
Yeah, it's
The way the bodies produce motion?
like it's the way that you can produce response in certain things.
Is
Like
this
your
affect?
response to things.
Is that
Like
affect?
I had a response to that. Yes, the apple falling had produced an affective response.
Okay, so like an apple falling produces affective response, right?
Yeah.
Isn't affect inevitable? Like why?
Yeah,
is it
sure. We
Our
said that the
argument is
YEC's attempt to try to say vote AF because our AF had certain effects betrays our commitment.
When did we say that?
Affect is
Wait.
out of our
When
control.
did we say that?
Wait,
You
wait,
asked
wait,
us
wait,
why
wait,
for
wait,
that. We
wait.
said, because his nigga's
Wait.
funny.
Yeah,
Trying to tie the affect
wait,
from 1AC to
wait.
the balance
You said-
demand for
You said
recognition.
I asked what affect was. I pushed the apple. You said me pushing the apple affected him. How is affect outside of our control if I affected him by pushing the damn apple?
You didn't control the response that people have to affect. Affect is about the response to the way that
Why
things
okay,
change.
if affect is inevitable, why is that a reason to not vote affect?
Our argument isn't that affect is bad. Our argument is that trying to attach affect to the ballot or to find some type of meaning behind affect instead of just
When you
recognizing
said
the chaos
that
of
vote
existence.
for AF because he's funny. so
Okay,
I said
how
that
is this
the
not a
ballot is
double
an
turn?
indictment of
Like,
his
aren't you
funniness
using
or not
affect?
because the affect
My
is
question,
unbelievable.
please
Sorry.
listen. Yeah, Lord, you're so. Or if you're using affect to tell the judge that he should not vote with affirmative because we use affect, aren't you using affect? How is this a double term?
No, our argument is, so there's sort of a double bind that the affirmative is in. Either ascribing meaning behind affect is problematic, which means that it's an impactor into your methodology, or if it's good to assign meaning to affect, then there's a topical
Doesn't
version
the
of the
framework
affirmative.
interpretation ascribe meaning to topic-specific education, to all the like aspects of why it's good?
We will only go for 1 and the 2 NR.
Yeah,
It's
but
a-
we
it's a
also
double
make
bind.
a claim about.
Wait, so because you read it in 1AC and because you can
No.
it
They're
makes it
also
okay.
wait. They're also not contradictory. Our framework argument is not a reason to vote for the comedic nature, the affective nature of the response to the 1NC, but rather because it inculcates specific skills that are necessary to combat
But
that material structures.
All that shit makes it seem like it produces a certain affect. I'm not understanding. If you produce affect, and affect is bad, why is that this?
Our argument is not
I
that.
have a question.
Yeah.
The card you said that says that deliberative debate solve existential crisis, you said from reading the card, the author says the topic does not matter, right? So in a world where the author said the topic doesn't matter, what's more important is the fact that research is being done. Why doesn't this like flow half?
Most of our arguments on framework are reasons why clear rules and a stable interpretation of the topic is an internal.
This evidence says the
yeah,
topic
yeah.
don't matter, saying why doesn't this flow half? Why don't we solve the existential crisis?
Because it talks also about things like prepared research necessarily.
I prepared research from my position.
Yeah,
the topic doesn't matter. Why doesn't it flow half?
It's not predictable for us to have prepared research.
Why do we
on
have to
the
be predictable?
Minutia things that could be
Why do we
related
have
or
to be
not
predictable
We're
for
talking
you?
about the topic. Why exactly is that not predictable?
Because you're not talking about the right direction of the topic, first of all. Second of all,
Right
it's like
direction.
tangentially related to the topic.
Classic. I'll take it.
I thought you didn't say one direction.
That would have been better.
That would have been a funny musical joke.
Can you explain to me? Oh, never mind. You know what?
Thank you.
That was a fact. What happened? He said we can't first. That was fact. If I'm supposed to do that.
I don't know what this hot theory shit talking about.
Then we do a topical research from marijuana book. I know you need it for your speech and shit, but
I really need it.
no, you good.
So,
Yeah.
Have fun.
That effect was strong.
yeah, probably also like summarize. I'll let you know the fourth one. Maybe just.
Okay. And then order.
Wait, I just have a question. Your Hemmings evidence is tagged, claim that there's truth or meaning to comedy performances is bad. So, like, should we not claim that there's such thing as truth?
Sure, that's the Deleuzian.
We should not claim there's anything as truth.
Wait, I don't think it makes a totalizing claim that there's nothing is true, but rather just saying that there is a. Actually, no, it's an indent of the way that you say if you're able to uncover truth. That's
So,
bad.
if I say Eric Garr was killed in a way that was horrible, is that bad?
No, but it's trying to use
I'm making a truth claim.
You know, yeah,
It is true that Eric Garr's murder was fucked up.
No, it's trying to use epistemological authoritarianism for your own good. Like trying to say competing knowledge claims against one another rather than exchanging knowledge. Our Deleuze evidence says that we should engage in the forms of
Okay, so what is knowledge if truth is not something that is like
Yeah,
can be
truth
established as such?
is truth is clearly important, but we're saying that trying to use
So we
epistemologies
should we should
trump
have
other
like
epistemologies is a bad form of politics because it
Okay.
justifies the way that conservatisms have been able to co-opt the way that truth is produced.
okay, what is co-option?
When conservatives are able to use a strategy that may be used by resistance groups for insidious
Okay,
purposes.
thank you. How is Dick Cheney going to co-opt the 1AC?
The way that knowledge production, for example, during things like World
So
War
Dick
II,
You
Cheney
think
gonna-
they Cheney about to cooperate with knowledge?
Donald Trump about to be
I
like,
don't even
yo,
know
black
Dick
people getting fucked. That's just what happened.
You think Dick Cheney is watching the stream right now?
I did, but that's what's
the
happening.
way that they're able to establish certain stereotypes of certain groups in order to promote like criminalization.
So I'm accountable for Bill O'Reilly's fucked up this city.
I mean, we would say that that's an inevitable result of the affirmative, and rather we should try and find strategies that are able to cope with it.
Like what?
Our Hemmings evidence says that rather than exchanging knowledge or things like that, we should exchange the possibilities
But
that
like,
the body
okay,
can have.
your Hemmings evidence has a like a relativistic orientation towards truth.
The first stop when I'm done was the top of the single shot.
What?
This person stopping them gun, or does it stop when anything else?
Mhm.
Okay.
It's
Don't
not-
worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I got you. I got
He
you.
said it stops when it goes up.
My bad.
We still have 11 minutes of prep.
We have 6.
Don't use truth. That's a far as I
Did you say 6:49? Okay.
You should be getting now. What are you saying?
You're gonna read the comments.
I should. Yes, you should.
Start up again.
My bad.
Let's see it. What's meta consensus?
Like having an agreement on some basic rules is necessary for pluralism. That's the argument Dries Cameron says. Like having basic terms and conditions for debate is necessary for the debate to be fair.
How do we establish which terms are, we can consent to if we should not have authoritarian interpretations of what truth is?
We say that it doesn't necessarily have to be authoritarian, but rather it can be something that's determined pluralistically.
What is pluralism?
Like the ability for a multitude of participants, despite their background, to be able to come together and decide on things.
Considering you read the Lewis, what constitutes a multiplicity?
Like anything, like multiplicity is.
So are we a multiplicity?
Sure.
So,
There are different multiplicities.
so why don't we access that if we're a multiplicity?
We
I
say
thought Multiplicity was a movie with Kevin Bacon.
I thought multiplicity was that shit that fucked me up in school. I could never get it once they introduced like the letters into it. It was,
Oh, you talking about?
it was a math joke.
Oh.
Ah. Yeah. Never again. No more math jokes. That's
is there gonna be a new doc after?
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
going to see right now. I'll stop right
So 5:16.
now. Speak it now. There we go.
oak doke.
All right, so the order is going to be the 1AC flow, then it's going to be a new sheet of paper, and the
I heard it.
I got you. So it's the 1AC flow, it's the new sheet of paper, and then paper. Man, this is my first 2AC.
Believe me.
This case, new sheet, and then frame.
All good.
Great. There is a consensus of the frame issue coming out of the 1AC, which indicates that the debate space is necessarily fucked up and very racist because of the inherently anti-black and colorblind policies that we say should be a part of the resolution and that we say we should legalize. That's probably a bad thing. Our methodology is going to be necessary to change this, and our playing of the dozens is going to be is a good thing. First reason is hardening. We are a method of oral tradition necessary to train our black children to accept what white society, what society doesn't like this. Needs a wide ass nostril. This is going to be Leaf Fever 81 playing the dozens to survive technique against being victimized rather than resorting to physical means to resolve conflict. The dozen hands one temper, black boys using manipulation, which will become part of their life and alternative explanation with black experience. Their brothers and sisters use dozens as a game to teach them how to keep cool and thinking fast under pressure without saying what is really on their mind. Second is going to be a cultural impact. Our performance is important for our particular community. Our humorous paradigm is one that coalesces with the ideas of community building. It's not just that if Other's outfit is ugly, it means that it's not means that he's lesser. It means that you are fucking more. If we're one, I'm one of the a couple of fat niggas that composes the Rutgers squad. my life, I always had to endure that constant reminder that I'm not good enough because my hair is too coarse, that I'm smart, but for a black kid, but I'd rather fuck you up with my words and roast my fist. This allows for constructive release of anger and deconstruction of debate space. Second, the third impact is that the signs are fun. The dialectical dismemberment that occurs when I deconstruct how much you look like Stinky from Hey Arnold and how big your ears are. Probably means that's injury par excellence by highlighting your ET phone home ass qualities and then roasting that ass some more can already less than can be reinterpreted and reapplied. This means that we're able to change the signs of the sign economy of the debate space for our particular performance to allow for different forms of interpretations that allow for the abnormality to be embraced in each of us. And the next argument is a spillover claim. That's conceded. Let's do a little historical analysis here. The 1950s, where the first time that black comedians made interracial jokes were created, a ripple through civil society. In the 1970s, Richard Pryor refuses to say nigger anymore, created a media buzz around the topic of blackness and racial relations. A little more recent, Dave Chappelle put $50 million fucking in the face of greedy capitalist system, which created a ripple society. Nigga Paul Mooney stays on CNN. We choose to signify our humor that creates these same type of ripple effects within the debate community. Now they say that group their affect argument. There's going to be a performing contradiction argument, and that turned back their framework because they turned back their framework. They have multiple aspects: education, decision-making processes, liberalism, fighting off existential threats, all that other type of shit. These are all aspects of framework. Probably means that they engage in that same type of replication of liberalism, the replications of the same type of authoritarian domination of the status quo, specifically within the debate round. This is probably going to be an in-round independent voting issue because they create the same type of authoritarian discourses that disallow for people of color, even when they succeed, to always be dealt with some type of in-round violence, because of the racial tendencies that mirror civil society within the debate space. Now, going on to the new sheet of paper, debate is funny as shit. White folks are always making claims that the system is becoming more impulsive for people of color in that community. As a community, we're changing this sector to form of debate, but white folks just can't seem to let go of that pride of secession, that little harkening of the Confederate flag that's in their heart. It's like the community's dialectically opposed to forms of different forms of intelligibility. Even when black folks went around that shit that we endure in these spaces, and we endure violence in these spaces, i.e. when Elijah and Brian went C to N, they went to NET, they still couldn't get their face on a fucking website. There's probably a reason as to why that violence happens. I'll give you another example. A couple years ago, Chris Randall, I know you know who he is, Rashad. He debated liberty, and he read a genealogy of lynching to describe anti-black violence. And they read anthro against him, saying that the lynching is that monkeys hang from trees. Couple reasons, a couple problems with that. The first of all, the only person in that room that looked like a monkey was the person that said it, What? She was a monkey, I don't care. She looked like a monkey. She had hairy ass arms and she had a low slumping ass forehead. Hell yeah, I said that shit. Our honesty is unwavering as we are to live. Parisian will speak from our position and our experience when we relate to others. This is going to be bossing. In 2014, Parisian is a moral quality for speaking in democracy, the evolution of this practice, critique both in politics, philosophy, craft, genealogy, critical attitude, the understand process, problem, and Parisian as a critics to people that put out when that lost one other what was said despite what the truth like anger or receiving the Parisian and responsible for criticism of Parisian originates from one of an inferior position against a more powerful portion or institution that sits in challenging political system. Parisian characterizes the practice of spiritual guidance in which the true tell sees the personal transformation that alters not only beliefs but opinions, but also one style of life, one relates to other, one relates to oneself. And also, why I see the couple that benefits the Parisiatic Sabbath first is the internalization of white standards. You will never be as good as white. I will be as good as white ideals strictly off of the fact of our blackness. The only way that we can do so is to embrace our position without pathology. Speaking the truth allows you to talk about how personally you're affected by white society's gaze. The tour guide is to me nothing that benefits you. That telling the truth in the face of those who oppress you is especially powerful, uniquely in the context of black humor, from the Boston 8, critical racial off to blame, and tell us what that condition is for the audience and racial about racial realities, attention to state of mind, white audience is strictly cultivated with common ground, the creating the to close unexamined presuppositions are for the audience to consider non-dominant racial experiences that have otherwise rejected the conclusion to the criticism, not offer the direct solutions that fulfill the role of the ethical guy, exposing knowledge about the racism so as to help his audience in act on transformation, their own transformation, and make their own judgment. That's also a disadvantage to their framework and to their methodology when they engage in a contradictory methods only means that we recreate the same type of slime economy that causes racism within particular spaces. That's going to be disadvantage to the framework. But I guess my next will go to the framework debate. First, that we meet their interpretation. We are a discussion of the topic. The entire Women's Speech Act and most of the jokes are racial disparities, discussing racial disparities that exist within the discussion of legalization, marijuana, organ sales, and physician-assisted suicide. These are three topic areas. Such sectors counter interpretation. We should humor the law through the one they see. There are going to be a couple of reasons to prefer interpretation. First is that mocking resolution is important. It allows to access topic-specific education through a different perspective. Criticism of legality is a unique kind of this resolution and analyzes relationship with black and brown bodies through our Speech Act. Allows for more accessible means of communication between debaters around, and Also, human reading the law is good to change things. It's going to be Jordan in 86. Public and professional perceptions of the judiciary have challenged radically in the past 50 years. The realist perception of justice as consequence for the judicial practice using imagery and humor. The use of frequent language is more likely to be accepted because of their realist view. Judge personality training, education, prejudices, and views of their role are bound to shape the way in which shape in some way the opinions they write and the way they write them. There exist several functional and theoretical justifications for the use of humor and imagery and judicial opinion. First, such language help demystify the law. This most basic level law is simply a reinstatement of everyday dispute between people or the government and citizens. Law aggrandizes the dispute with the use of such like the terms of cause of action, litigation, and tries another with a wide human problem in the formal setting. People setting what can be called self-legitimation. The law formalizes and thereby complicates everything surrounding the ultimate resolution. The conflicts arise from everyday life experience and imagery, and humor can reshape the disputes. The story that originally was help bring the dispute back down to earth to dispel some of the notions held by the effect of the legal system. Mark at legal system next to their interpretation is bad for a couple of reasons. First, it enforces the politics of respectability. Yeah, fuck that shit, that whole trying to fit in to Negro America and keep your mouth shut. That yes man, that Mr. Me Too ass nigga, that lifestyle ignores the social conditions that will force niggas that can sell their liver to be barely below the federal poverty line, but now they don't have that health care to take care of that scar she got when she hit her kidney away. We disrupt these north through our use of the offensive language, disobeying the masses. Matter of fact, yo, Chris, talk about how much you look like Stinky from Hayano, and if you can lean the left, you can hear what's happening in Somalia right now. Next is Parisian speaks truth to power.
Why the father don't make sure it looks stable on?
Because it is, Parisian speaks truth to power and is open to the possibility of danger. Topical version of the affirmative speaks truth is power and reinforces our complacency against the state and allows for social ill. Next argument is that the decision-making impacts are precluded by the acts of the issue of accessibility. Only those black and brown bodies that can be assimilated into racialized poverty script are seen as necessary recipient of these skills. The other ones are ignored. This is going to be DSRB and 12. The median attempt to reinscript unity of black youth as victims of the transcend poverty and median ability to narrow the lead reinscript. The student that sets the rule makes the story of UDM notable student who now he whatever considered behind the college. If you haven't felt the adrenaline debate, the cluster phase indicates that the student population be built targeting our potential criminal, that these kind of students must be redeemed through debating the scripts and students from their common representation the chaos disorder. Even as UDM students are notable for because they did this, sometimes unable to escape the defending narrative success, market success, and the next is the double consciousness. Is that the activity of the debate itself is one that coerces racialized authors to speak in a Clorox language practices to succeed. Our performance of black linguistics in conjunction with other forms of debate reveals the potential aspect of reversing the discussion and debates to be inclusive of others. This is going to be Reed Brinkley et al. In 2013, Reed Brinkley notes the cost of evidence all together opportunity to accessible things like showing that children must coming back to big practice. The art that moving women that such children must do a black performance. I see disquieting for the white males upon that phone. I'm sure I read this news, but there are children confused how to respond. It's not that their bodies fall to understand their language, but that their opponents have been little experience upon the level of the women's bodies, which use to mark the blacks through all black cultural experiences. Practice all opponents the meaning of significant performance because they may understand the words. Again, analysis such a total situation can only be enriched through understanding of double consciousness. Yeah, you can mark the double consciousness. I didn't get to the last two cards. Okay, cool.
Second up front.
Oh, 11 seconds, so 9:40.
You official? What? You official? I respect that.
I know y'all ready.
All right. Let's start with the piece of humoring the law evidence that you read for your counter interpretation. What does humor do to change sort of legal structures or the way that criminalization?
Cool. We just cut this card last night. That card is pretty good. It talks about how like in judicial reviews and when it comes to like legal proceedings, judges use interpretations of like law and image, humor and imagery to be able to show the inconsistencies in law, to try to show that the patterns of law create certain disparities.
Okay, so I guess if the internal link to your argument is the revealing of the inconsistencies in law, what's the result that comes from the revealing of those inconsistencies?
They change.
To what type of laws? Because a lot of what I see is something better.
Yes.
Then why is the use of humor in the affirmative incompatible with the advocacy of that something better in one of the topic areas?
That's why we
just said it.
No,
I don't understand the question.
It's not. That's why we made a firm.
It's not incompatible. Why don't you defend any of the making better of one of those topic areas in the 1AC?
What do you mean?
We defend our performance.
We
say that we prefer not to.
Yeah, because
we don't exclude that.
We
don't
don't.
reason to not do
it's
it.
not that we exclude like other affirmatives that can talk about that. But we say that the resolution itself is A, colorblind, B, pretty fucking racist, especially when it looks at the undertones of what legalizing. Not only just like marijuana practices and organ sales, but the concept of legality
The
is
next
something that
question
is
is,
necessary.
why is framework a reinposition of the politics of respectability?
Are you serious?
What?
Yeah.
You
You really want to
telling
really
me-
answer that question?
You
You say instead of doing black linguistic practices or what we did in one of the
Wait, where does our framework interpretation say instead of?
it was framed in terms of.
So are you saying that we're part of the rest? All right. So if it is, if
You
it's
read the
not,
framework
if it's
yet?
fine, no, if it's not instead of, that means there's no reason to vote negative because we meet the interpretation. If it is instead of, that means you are forcing us to be the type of debater that has to debate like fucking Andrew Markoff and Arch from fucking Georgetown and have to read this ads and fucking counterplans where we have no ability
Let's
to do that.
talk about the performative contradiction argument. How is the case argument a double term of framework?
Fine, I'll break it down. When you try to explain what affect was, I'm pretty sure maybe you explain it well. It's probably because high theory is fucking stupid. But when you explain what affect is, right? The affect of framework, it creates certain affect, i.e., your interpretation or the limits or the reasons why your interpretation is good. Creates education affect, creates a decision making affect.
So the link for the double term argument is that our reading of framework created affect.
No. But your justification for reading framework creates that affect.
Okay,
That affect. No. I'm not done yet.
creation.
Because it gets a little deeper than that. It's a little deep.
All right.
Real deep. So when I talk about you create that affect, not only do you create that affect, and you create that like type of like authoritarianism that the car talks about, we gave you a specific instance. We create that type of authoritarianism in debate rounds. And you force us to be able to underneath that guise where we have to talk a certain way to discuss certain things. Which the evidence we read talks about that's fucked up. It probably means that you're disingenuous for not engaging in these type of linguistic practices. Probably also means that you really aren't educational in the first place because you won't allow for different kinds of understandings, which is necessary for education.
All right, 9:49.
I mean, it's what?
Can you bring me something back in your?
Sorry.
We're just trying to change the name. That was one of those sorry, not sorry. It's okay.
I'm gonna just make those like bias. What'd you say?
So that was a sorry, not sorry. But
What?
like they'll give you like I'm sorry, I'm great.
I'm sorry, I mean, Reese's cup for you. You know that's your favorite candy. Oh, I'm kidding. You didn't know.
I think everyone knows that.
Actually, no.
But yeah,
I do love
I
Reese's.
thought
I think everyone
about
knows.
making both of those arguments in a debate round, just like using that as kind of like a metaphor for the critique against. Yeah, so.
Look at the crime economy. That's all right.
Because the simple answer to the question, what do you want to do about it? Well,
How about you say four rocks? Why can't you touch it?
Start up, anyway.
Heartbreak and 808.
I'm gonna go get some.
Call, still a press call.
They'll be able to hear you.
You about to get back on straight in speech.
What if I might get it? What's the word?
Oh.
I'm guessing it's framework.
Framework and then new sheet. Parisia is, you don't call it that?
Oh, Parisia. Oh, I'm gonna say you got a new sheet too?
No.
I was about to say, I really didn't think you had it.
Sorry, there you, the Parisia page.
200K? Got that.
The counter K.
Okay, hold up. He said counter king. Then I was like, counter king. So I abbreviated that as KKK for some reason in my mind. And I decided I'm not gonna call it.
That'll be 3. That'll be 4. Counter K? That's 4.
Leave me alone, alright? I'm just saying. Exactly, you got educated.
You're not intelligible right now. Yes.
Blackness is opaque. What's the order?
What is framework?
Framework and then Parisia.
Thank you, Colin.
What? Oh yeah, that. I'll close the door. Okay, let me know when everyone's.
Wait, you sent it. You didn't send no file.
Oh wait, did I?
Did you send something?
I swear I did.
I mean, no, maybe you did. I didn't even check. I didn't know it was ours.
Maybe you should check.
I checked. All right. Check this now. My bad.
Another accusation. Why didn't you give me the phone?
Okay. Yeah, all right. I'm good now.
Sounds good. Overview: the role of the ballot debate vote for the team that is investigating any other interpretation of debate is arbitrary in this only way to ensure equitable access to the ballot in the first place and first argument, and that their discussion of the topic that is not enough. They are not even in the direction of the topic when they criticize things like legalization of marijuana, obviously not a debate, predictable for the negative. They can claim extra topic of the pension based off of things like comedy. There are a couple of impacts to this. Some point is a loss of predictable ground, which makes it impossible to be negative. We cannot clash with their app because every predictable argument we have on this topic, whether it be legalization, vaccine ban, top carrier ban, etc., are no linked by the app. This is a prerequisite to the substance of the 1AC because the violation of the division of ground makes it impossible to be negative, meaning we cannot validly test the truth link to the 1AC. Also obviates the need of a debate round in the first place because the app does not have any reason, any to make key argument with music about negative on assumption. That's our piece of Galloway evidence. Some point B is that this is the link for all of our process focused good arguments. In order to come up with the best strategy, we need to test the process of the affirmative. I will do that debate right now. They will make an definitely an argument that process focus is bad, but our model of debate is good. This should be the lens through which we view this debate. Which I promote the best model of debate. Some point is that debate simulations are good. That's our 1C. The online acceptance. Specifically, we need to anchor debates within clear rules, stable topics, and institutional role playing. We're not an advocacy for a specific type of content, but how we should shape our pedagogical processes. Only grounding debate within specific rules and our uses education, engagement, and empathy. Our emphasized educational studies about constructed course curriculum and concludes that our rules are good. Couple of impacts. First is education. Grounding debate within limits and rules increases our ability to absorb subject material. This outweighs any app impact because it's the most portable impact. The content we learn from debate is the only thing we'll retain once we leave the activity. Second is education, engagement, and empathy. Classroom studies demonstrate that our model of debate encourages students to make the world a better place. This means that our model controls actual solvency for the app impact. It teaches students to be empathetic so we can translate what we learn in debate to the real world. This is the biggest external impact for our piece of Lumberg evidence. Debate teaches us to deal with real world issues like information overload, making decisions, engagement, and evaluative choices in a complex world that teaches us to deal with things like social justice issues, environmental destruction that ultimately culminates in extinction. That the Lumberg, the app cannot access this because there needs to be some basic form of engagement with the app and some basic form of rules to ground our forms of discussion. That was our 1NC piece of Trizek evidence. Now, their next argument is that humoring the law necessarily needs to be humoring the law can be good. Yeah, sure. Their first card is back to negative law, the negative card, but humoring the law can have political implications. There's no reason why humoring the law has to trade off with an actual advocacy for the resolution. For example, using satire and humor in ways of mocking status quo marijuana laws and then advocating for why removing the marijuana law can be good in the first place. The T version of the app is participatory satire. They can tie their advocacy for political progressivism like Stephen Colbert, Richard Pryor, Dave Chappelle. They can satirize the ban on marijuana as a way to spur citizenry participation, then advocate for the United States should legalize marijuana in the United States, including the establishment of a minority-owned business set-aside licensing system as reparations for those disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. This is Dickerson in 12. It is evident that the Colbert Super PAC initiative has influenced the perspective of many involved within the political debate over campaign finance regulations. These like debate over the influence money is limited to grow louder. Colbert used a satirical persona to play a significant role in shaping the debate and influencing the perspectives not only views but political experts and news media. Traditional satire seems to be merely poking fun at things from an outsider. I mean, the satirist is just by definition a kind of outsider. He's not just making fun of super PAC, he has one. It is participatory satire. It's satire to the point of performance art. Colbert has created a new model of political participation, a kind of political activism which employs message about ironic support, sarcastic dissent, as well as real world participation for voicing strong opposition to political issues. As became clear when he recruited hundreds of coalitions to join him in their own spin of super PAC, copying the middle maybe with the formation of citizens, actual understanding of messages and based with a complex nuance political humor such as Colbert's is essential to populist message that our system has become undemocratic and ultimately progressive changes needed. The strategic use to center not only calls for that change, but also in the movement is a political phenomenon that is likely to grow as worth our continued attention. Also, there are examples of things like Richard Pryor and way use the N-word to change discussions about racism proves that material change and some sort of material advocacy is ultimately necessary. So there's no reason why that's mutually exclusive of the one you see now. These two versions of the app will solve them, establishing a minority set-aside system ensures legalization is done in a way that avoids white monopolies and provides reparation for the war on drugs. Obviously, with the bad examples that they bring up in the one you see, this is Wallace in 14 after 40 years impoverished black men getting prison time for selling weed. White men are planning to get rich doing the same thing. How do we prepare the harms caused? Reparations will take more than one approach. We need a smorgasbord more than a silver bullet. The most interesting development is black entrepreneurs in the world of legalized marijuana. The black community has suffered disproportionately from bias drug law enforcement. The reparations form part of the conversation. Some recommend revenue be investing communities have saved by drug policy. Another option we set aside marijuana licenses for minority businesses. For example, a existing program that calls for women and minority-owned businesses that sets aside some states strictly limit the number of licenses. This makes the licenses extremely valuable, and the most comprehensive study proves that it actually works. Chatterjee et al. In 13, the study quantified the effect of set-aside enable a new database enables more comprehensive, reliable analysis than previously possible. Set-aside had a large significant impact on business ownership. The programs appear to have reallocated self-employment from white to black. The racial gap in employment fell in the absence of these set-aside programs. Black employment would have continued to decline. Set-aside programs can lead to a large increase in the number of black-owned businesses. Their next argument said that it is good to change their humor. Yeah, sure, we agree with that. We say that you should anchor that to some topical form of discussion. Next argument they make is that our interpretation of the topic is bad because we force them to use a white man's language. There's no reason why we will be policing on your form of expression or what language you use. Do you think you apply satire to black comedy in order to advocate for some sort of topical form of language or speak to power, whatever you want, but you should tie that ultimately to some sort of material political action because we necessarily think that's good. Now, the next argument they say is that it is inaccessible. I will extend our Barker evidence here. Barker evidence says that engaging in topical discussions can be the basis for breaking down the prison system. The public can and needs to be more involved. De-democratization is a reason why politics succeed in the status quo, not some sort of inherent anti-blackness. Proves that the system is malleable to our demands. Engagement can be productive to dethrone the way that shitbag conservatives actually engage in the status quo. Reformers can take advantage of the political movement. Trustees realize that budgets are suffering and have to reprioritize crime control. They're also starting to understand things like imprisonment actually leads to more social problems. It proves that we can actually change the way that certain white people can think. Also, engaging with institutions is necessary to solve the affirmative means where they are insufficient. Some point a social change. That's our one of the piece of movement. That's critique as withdrawal ignores the way that representative politics can change how social politics are articulated. Radical difference can occur through institutions with this way of creating space for heterogeneity to function. Alternatives fail because they seek political. The right was reified all this status quo and turns all of their accessibility arguments. Someone be it is true in the context of debate. That's one of the channels. There's no outside of the system where we can work, meaning that the state engagement is necessary for the app to solve. Electoral politics allows us to build room for which alternatives can take place. We can identify problems and then craft legal solutions to do something about them. Chandler says that there's actual trade-off between our multiple versions. Our last argument is this piece of scenario. Read the evidence. We're not policing your language or how you choose to advocate. We'd rather say that materiality matters because there are people locked up in prison in the status quo and we can learn these skills within a debate round to change the material reality for them. Reasons why our teachers with the functions as a counter methodology. Now the Parisia page. This is not independent offense for them. Yes, Parisia can be viable, but it's not a reason why our framework argument is necessarily bad. Yes, the way that debate is in the status quo may be actually really bad for a lot of people. However, that's not a reason to reject our interpretation of debate. Rather, a reason why we should reform the practices that we have and encourage different forms of debate, i.e. focusing on things like structural impact. But we in context can actually do that. However, things like questions of materiality are necessary. We can use debate for some of the valuable things they can have, i.e. how to change the law, how to speak truth to power, how to deal with the way that conservatives have been able to change the law, the status quo. This is ultimately a necessary call to dismantle anti-blackness. This is Smith in 10. What are your thoughts about the state? There is no outside of the system. I don't think there's a pure place to work, so you can work in many places, including the state. There's no reason not to engage in electoral politics. We build alternatives, build a movement to hold us accountable when we work within the system. It would be helpful if we had some critical people within the state. They might be able to do something. We might think about that relief pressure. We might try to build alternatives. May not work out to make it co-opted. If we really knew the right way, we would have done it by now. Now they're going to cross-apply a lot of their survival strategies arguments. However, the logic of survivability reinscribes these social values and coherence of whiteness. Instead of survival strategies, we need collective strategies for livability. The debate community needs to be more. This is Cacho in 12. Value practices make social statuses recognizable as valuable values fundamentally relational to establish values to devalue politics. We have to evaluate them according to normative criteria. We could not escape the devaluation should remember the other right to remember and value this means suspending. I need you to finish this part.
All right. So first question.
Yeah.
You say we need to have a way to like reform debate, but how do we limit the potential for debate to reform itself without being authoritarians?
What do you mean? It's not necessarily authoritarian, but it's something
Well, like
that can make
on the
more
affect flow, you said that. You said that.
No, yeah. It's not a way that makes it more
So
authoritarian.
like how?
but it's
So
not-
like how is your like limiting? Because you're framing this as like a reason to not do the ad. So how is this exclusion of
we say
when they see an appeal to reform, not authoritarian, and determining what counts as reform and what does not?
it's a reason why the AF could have been done under the topic and why our model of debate is good. It's a debate about
Why is it a
I want to
methodology.
go back to the topical version of the ad. Your topical version, but your next subpoint of the topical version, opposed to engaging and talking about the racial undertones of the resolution, you say no, just give us reparations. Don't you think that's fucked
No,
up?
that's not an end to the talk about
You
racial.
literally just broke that. That's the argument you made. And then the next argument you made is it can be
Wait, I'm actually
transformed.
cool on that if you have money on you right now.
No, let's not. Let's go back to your question. What was it again?
Do you have money on you right now?
Sure, yeah.
The argument is that the argument. No.
You about to do reparations like or not?
No. Right. For instance, the argument you make right before topical version is that humoring the law can be good.
Yeah.
Right. How exactly is humoring the law? How exactly is the affirmative not an example of that humoring the law?
Yeah, sure. But our piece of Gilkerson evidence goes a step further and says that there's a difference between satire and participatory
So
satire.
opposed to doing
Participatory satire participates in the system.
So opposed to the idea of black linguistics, when we tell like jokes from like a black humorous perspective, we need to be more like Colbert.
No, we're not saying.
Now
You can also be like.
Colbert 6 times.
Yeah,
already.
sure. It says Colbert, but also.
So shall I put a tie on the
So
same
like in
old man?
a round like sure, cool would be funny, but in a round where we specifically talk about the merits of like black comedy, why is
Yeah,
why
black
is
comedy can
why is
also be
Irish
great
American
at
comedian
unsettling
why
people.
is an Irish American comedian responsive if we're talking specifically about black comedy's relationship?
Yeah, we also use example because that's a way that was able to change the political system. We also use example of
So we
like Pryor
need
and
to- so we
Chappelle
need
and
to-
the way they created prominent political discussions that changed the
So,
way
like, why-
that
oh,
people.
That's another thing. You said Pryor and Chappelle create political discussion. Correct? Isn't that through their humoring of the law and their humor and their humor?
That's not a
Right?
reason
Why is
you
that not a
couldn't
reason as to
advocate
why
under
we
the-
don't see the political, we change the political?
That's
Which is the
also
argument I made in the 2AC if you didn't listen.
because
I know you
engaging
heard-
with the technicalities of the law is also necessary. Those were our other arguments.
You said the what of the law?
Engaging with the technical details of the law is necessary.
So what technical part of the law
Sufficient
did
in and of
time
itself.
out. In the 1970s, where it was a very racist undertone of American policy, what law did Richard Pryor help change? No. Better question. I'll take it back further. Sure. Red Fox was a comedian in the 1960s where racism was very serious.
He wasn't
But he was
political fox.
Yeah, Red Fox. What politics did he help change? Was he on the Senate floor? Did they have him at the House?
No, which
Was he Jimmy Carter's
which
best
proves
friend?
the sufficiency of a lot of
No.
arguments.
Better. What law did Dave
Calling on the
Chappelle help change? Once he left in 2004, what law did he help change?
It can help
Was it
spark
a
discussions
rupture in
about things
society
like
that happened
racism
as a
and the way
result of
progressive
humor?
made things like the 13th.
Wait, there are politicians that
Also
look
things
funny.
like the way the affirmative
All I heard him
action
say was
policies
keep
have been
that
replicated, all the way that affirmative action policies have been promoted in the status quo. Those are other ways that we can change things like racial discussions within
You
society.
didn't answer my question, B. It's all good.
I'll be finishing that last part
The Wild Seven.
The catch.
Oh, catch all. Okay.
in the 2NC, and then it'll be case with no.
Alright, that started this.
Oh, okay. This means.
Yep.
You looked at it?
Oh shit! Wait a minute. There's a speech. Come on. I keep forgetting.
He's an experienced debater. He's been doing this for a very long time.
I like
His memory is faulty because he was on the topic earlier recently.
it.
He's on his brain, is what I'm saying.
So did you give the order? Are you going to finish that card and go case?
Yeah.
Oh shit! Say no.
Alright, anyone not ready?
He does.
This means suspending the impulse to reject stereotypes precisely because of mere chance to recuperate social values contingent on that rejected imagined policy based on the refusal of such values an impossible, unthinkable one. Instead of any available notion, political this project is not concerned with whether something is politically practical and logistically possible because its approaches to new legal apparatuses are legitimate and fixable. Our realization can lead commands that are less likely to worsen conditions. The critical task is not a result of contributions to reintegrating the socially dead to humanity. It makes us some of our sense of mobilizing against perversion, way life and the ways of knowing and life preserves rather breathe life in the spaces of the social death justification we might chances of working because the logic of survivability, which the United States sees as the preservation of the American way of life. Those who are socially valued do not get to decide what makes life, or the difference between surviving and living. Now, on the case, the overview is that their justifications for voting out are rooted in ascribing meaning to affect, and so we should begin with the ontological claim that all the world is chaos. Instead of trying to tie a meaning to the circulation of affect, we should find the aesthetic parts of it appreciable. The affect is a presentation of humor in the one I see, but trying to attach it to the ballad is like the person who tries to explain why their jokes are funny. Attempting to find meaning behind the circulation of affect creates resentment because it represents an inability to recognize the randomness and chaos behind existence. We can only cope with existence if we attach a false meaning to it, rooted in a false understanding of truth. And the impact of this is not to turn to the rest of their case, where one and two for evidence says that affect, the motivations, and need to belong controls the very organization of liberalism and violence itself. Meaning is not a root cause of meaning; it's a root cause of the absent impact. In the prior question, the political is maintained not by a commitment to a certain ideology, rather is maintained an attachment to the affective feeling political together with the Bush administration's creation of an affective community through direct appeal to the moral sentiments of the people, found the attachment of rage and anger that makes a Tea Party possible. Now, on a couple of their line-by-line arguments, the first is the framing issue of the topic being fucked up and racist and colorblind. The root of this is the root of the parts of resolution being problematic or from the affect of belonging. A good example of this is their critique of the politics of respectability. The affect of belonging is the feeling that certain racist individuals get from trying to attach to community where respectability assigns a certain type of meaning to, that they use to exclude other individuals. The chaotic nature of the world means that communities are always bound to exclude people, which means that a better way of dealing with the colorblind and racist nature of the topic is not through trying to ascribe meaning through the humor used to criticize that, but rather the recognition of the chaotic nature of existence and the chaotic nature of the circulation of affect. Also, it's a framing issue for all of the benefits that they say from the humor theory is that none of these are reasons to vote for the affirmative. Our position on the case is not that affect is problematic or that humor is bad. We can accept that humor is good, but trying to ascribe meaning to that, but endorsing their humor with a ballad just tries to recreate a meaning to an inherently chaotic world, which recreates a problem associated with the affect of belonging. There are a couple of impacts to the app's belief in opening the political sphere and new spaces to discuss racism in the topic, because it perpetuates the same logic of belonging that has multiple impacts. First is liberalism. The affect of inclusion and belonging is how the political maintains itself. That's where the constitutive process of acting in concert with one another maintains a commitment to political structures. Despite how radical the app may be, it's not good enough to just be recognized or included, because it causes us to forget that society is structured to a desire to belong. The new spaces that the app creates will just be manipulated again by the interest of the select few to do violence against many, while giving that feeling that our voices are being heard. Second is the universality of the ballot. The ballot participates in the affect of belonging by deciding what does and does not count as a legitimate and intelligible argument to the debate community. Our argument, our evidence indicates that this is the wrong starting point. We must question whether or not the organization of political communities around belonging gives value to life. The affect of belonging is bad because it never does violence to those who because it does violence to those who belong. And the app's call for recognition inverts the same binaries that they oppose. We should not define our sense of self based on the recognition of others. This is Watkins in 10. Every binary split creates a temptation to reverse it, turns to what is necessary to take sides, remain focused on the dualistic nature of itself. Its success depends upon recognition of worth by both parties being integral to the sense of self-founded. Describes how the individual subjectivity is premised upon the recognition of other powers, not neutralizing if you conceive, repressive with a need for acknowledgement as a confirming confirmation of self-worth. Integral as part of it as affect recognition, positive because it's the character of approval, affect, the sensations one may feel in being recognized. Moments of recognition function. The affective force recognition can function in a negative way. Bomb goes on the right, to get to the alternativity to the person who can't say or do anything to change her life materially, who is taking it so much at one of the moment of relief. Herself produces a crack in the genres of her survival. The losing water re-exhort people to become minor, and the deterritorialize it by digging a hole, creating a space of internal displacement, checks hierarchies, clarities, tyrannies, and confusions, applies with autonomous individuality, the optimism of attachment to another being is it's itself the cruelest like of all. Change of heart, sensational shift into subjectivity or transference cannot generate its own good life, nor can the collaboration of a couple brothers or pedagogy shifts in the attempted atmosphere are not equal to changing the world. They are only pieces of an argument about the centrality of optimistic fantasy surviving in those zones comprise ordinariness. That is a way to make measure the impassive living life in the present now. Their performative contradictions arguments. First is that it's not a contradiction. The link is contextualizing cross-examination, is that the discussion of framework is the producing of affect. Our argument is not that affect is bad, that's in the overview. The argument is that assigning meaning to affect is bad, which is something that the affirmative does by trying to use a ballot as a tool to recognize their humor. Our framework argument doesn't do that. Also, no reason why framework has to be liberal. The two NC arguments about topic versions of the app are a reason that humor can be combined with understanding of the law that don't rely on a community of belonging or that disrupt processes that rely on the affect of belonging in order to exclude certain individuals. individuals. Also, we claim in the overview that affect is true, which is a reason why there are arguments about the framework argument also being affected don't link to affect arguments. Also, testing the affirmative from multiple points is not a reason why why testing it would be inauthentic. Test of authenticity or non-falsifiable, which makes it impossible to adjudicate debates. Instead, it's better to challenge for the affirmative from multiple perspectives because we gain a better understanding of the benefits and disadvantages to the affirmative. They're more disingenuous because they can't endorse the humor for what it really is.
Bad arguments.
516.
Yeah, we got it. Right. Yeah. All right, write that down real quick so I can read it off your thing. Stop there. 2:30. Oh, you had more?
No,
You sure? I heard you about to say 2:40.
I had 240, but
I mean,
if you all want to take it, yeah, that's fine.
all right, we got
We
240.
already celebrations. We'll take that in a second. I feel like I'm in like a Macy's.
You're just on display.
Yeah. And I know the security guard is watching. But I act like I'm not phased by it.
There's somebody watching this?
I know.
Okay.
Well, I actually got like 2 viewers max. Kozak can probably it.
That was good. All right, the order is going to be the Parisian flow. Then for the Parisian flow, it will be the case flow, and then for case flow, it will be the frame.
No new card, right?
No card. My bad.
You just got to be anxious.
Shut up. Trying to focus, man. Ready? Bring that framework interpretation here, boy. There's a couple of reasons why Parisian is going to be an independent disadvantage, and two, why their interpretation is necessarily bad, necessarily good versus the Salty argument. That's going to come back to see coming out the Ross evidence indicates that when you do not tell truth in the face of the oppression, when you do not tell truth in the face of oppression that causes you to become complacent within that system and allow for the type of oppressive system to always become another, i.e. Way with their framework interpretation, always allow for white forms of debate to disallow for black linguistic practices probably means that they are a form of authoritarianism. The next argument is that they create false movements. Our Ross evidence is pretty specific on how when you engage these type of methodologies that are not against a particular master, it creates movements in the wrong direction that only worsen the pride against the other, like disallow for you to access your form of subjectivity. We create a movement against these type of particular paradigms in the world where we're in the ethical tour guide. Allow for the truth to always be taught, allow for the truth to always be spoken, and it's a necessary component to be able to change the way in which the base is happening. They say they gave you the states necessary to change, but that is bullshit. When in the framework argument they justify that Richard Pryor and Dave Chappelle are going to be political avenues to actually create change. I cannot stress this shit enough. They are literally saying that our methodology is necessary to be able to create a massive political change. The process is pretty damning on this question. When I'm like, was Dave Chappelle ever at the House floor and the Senate floor? Was Richard Pryor ever on the Senate floor? They are still able to create ripples in society by engaging by doing take-part racial truth telling to show racial disparity between people. Our engaging with the resolution in that context allows us to change those type of forms in debate and also members of society. But I can say on the next one, they say logical survivability. That's not our methodology. All that shit is about the social death and about ontological description of blackness. That's not our argument. We're not really Buddhist, and our argument is that we are engaging in a type of coping mechanism that allows us to fight the faces of white supremacy and be able to challenge that system through our comedy. Now, the case debate, they say that assigning meaning is going to be the reason why affect is necessarily a bad thing, but that still links back to that form of contradiction on the framework argument because they assign a particular meaning to the ballot that says that by signing a ballot, it forces us to be engaging in forms of education and decision-making process that are necessary to change things. Probably means that they're creating a worse form of affect because it disallows for other forms of linguistics and other forms of debate that can be necessarily educational or progressive to be able to change that type of liberalism to be able to access this particular perspective. This probably means that they create that impact. Now, the next argument, they say that there's a difference between the effective belonging of a cookout and a KKK rally. Throwing out all affect is bad because they never distinguish good and bad affect, including black community building. That's the impact of the one they see that this add to their methodology. Next to the affect is inevitable. They say find what is appreciable, appreciate the one they see with the affirmative ballot. No articulation as to why, but presumption flows affirmative. Any argument against that is a double turn. All their discussion about the law must be communal to be able to challenge that. That is the evidence on the framework debate. But I get to that on the next floor. Our argument, they're also perceiving a couple of advantages to the one they see. First, the spillover claim that talks against the genealogy and why history has been able to create ripples in social media, and not just social media, but in society, through creating racial disparity, through acknowledging and showing out the racial disparities that exist within society. The second is the community building aspect portion of that, which is necessary to engage when we talk about these type of intersections at the discussion or at the basis of black humor. It allows for other people to be engaged with that type of message. I'll give you a pure example. The Dave Chappelle Block Party in 2004 was an example when he brought multitudes of fucking people to, and comedy was the root cause that bringing these people together to actually create social change, and create a movement against something. That probably means that we create some type of community building, effective community building outside of the debate. Now, let's go down to the framework interpretation. You're gonna start from the bottom of the floor here with Sade, say that Pryor was political. I can't stretch this shit enough. This literally means that engaging and actually taking part in policy making probably is not going to be the only way to engage or change the political. Okay, that's next. It's all the reasons as to why engaging the policy making be necessarily good, because we don't need to engage in that system. If we prove that system is necessarily racist, probably means that we shouldn't engage it. Now, they say that the topical version of the app means that we should be taking part in satire. First is that Parisian is going to impact turn. The satire is only speaking true truth, not speaking again. No, only speaking true truth, not speaking for truth. Speaking for truth means actually telling it like it is. But satire avoids that possibility because they don't want to get that type of blowback from the powers that be. Parisian and racial truth telling through black humor doesn't give a fuck about that because it's necessary to be transformative to be able to change things. Now, the next argument, they say that humor in the law can be good. There's no reason why it can't be a topical version, but that's the force of the politics respectability, which is going to be conceded. Their arguments about politics respectability were bullshit in the world where they say that they're not going to be policing us, but we should engage in political action. That itself is it. That just contradict themselves. They are engaging in policing that disallows for these type of linguistic practices that can open up new forms of debate. Now they're also conceding the double consciousness that's coming down to a C. That's the rebuttal evidence indicates that our performance of black linguistics in conjunction with other forms of debate, i.e. line by line or framework debate, creates a potential aspect of reversing discussions and debate to be inclusive of others, meaning that this is going to be a disadvantage to their interpretation because they disallow for other necessary linguistic practices. Another disadvantage to interpretation they're conceding is the accessibility disadvantage. That's going to be a disadvantage to their interpretation as well. That's the rebuilding 12 evidence, which indicates that the only people who are going to be necessarily accessible are the people who can be part of that racialized poverty script for African American bodies. And if when people don't engage or people of color don't fit that particular script, they're left to the wayside or ignored when it comes to debates of decision-making calculus, meaning that we are not going to be accessible. We're not from that particular standpoint. Probably means that they don't access everybody. Now they say we're not a cross-body and counter interpretation, and the Jordan evidence indicates that humor in the law is necessary through public profession through the humor to actually be able to change systems of power.
Okay, cool. You're supposed to be very mad. I'm very double conscious stuff. How much crack got that?
422.
Back out the room. Okay.
Wash your hands. You ain't gonna do it either way.
What you say?
No.
You don't know if I'm gonna do it. I'm a bad motherfucker.
He's bad. That's why he won't do it.
Did you fly into Wichita? What's that? Did you fly into Wichita?
Oh yeah, I did fight.
What's that like? I rebelled. They have a sign that says they're the capital of the world. That's all I really remember about it. It wasn't bad. It's a tiny little airport.
Did you ever go to the Long Beach airport when it was? When did you first go to Long Beach when you got out there?
No, like a few years ago, I flew to Long Beach.
Yeah, 'cause when I first got out there, the airport was like about the size of this room. There was a door on each side of the gate. You walked on the runway to your plane.
The
baggage
purple.
check outside. Right?
It's still significantly outside.
Yeah. That's kind of what I imagine the Wichita airport being like. No.
It's more depressing. It's more like Kansas City airport. You know. Yeah, I like the Long Beach airport now, especially.
Yeah, I mean,
It's easy.
I loved it when I moved out there. They had JetBlue flights to New York and JetBlue flights to Washington. Right? And it was like 12 hours per week.
I do remember when JetBlue was flying out of there.
And it's pretty much that and Oakland, pretty much the only places you could go.
We went air, maybe on the air. $50 tickets.
Oh, can you tell my-
25. You can go like wherever. That was pretty awesome. You could just fly stand by.
Yeah.
Then they took that away.
And they realized that
Wait, who owns Air Canada?
Southwest.
Okay. Case, framework, Parisian. Okay, let me know whenever it's good. Okay, cool. Actually, starting off with performative contradiction. Sorry. But yeah. Performative contradictions is not a reason to vote affirmative. Subpoint is that top galley is a gateway issue. The affirmative has to prove by a parametric of the top is a good idea before the evaluation of any other argument. They have not met that burden. Subpoint B is that there's no lengthy one-year argument about framework ascribing meaning to the ballot is new. That bad secures to late-breaking debates that structurally advantage the app. Also, a framework argument does not ascribe meaning to the ballot rooted in the affect of belonging. They just simply try to change things. That's not our linked argument. They consider one argument that framework does not have to justify things like liberal politics of belonging, but rather can break the system from within. Subpoint C is that they have conceded that testing the app is a good idea because it allows us to gain more education about particular advantages and disadvantages of their methodology, which is a good form of education about colorblindness and racism in the topic. The app has prevented by voting for them is good. Framework in our case arguments are two ways to test that, and there's no link to our throw the affect argument. Subpoint is we have never made an affect bad argument. We say that affect wasn't a reason to vote for them, or if it was, then a justified topical version of the app. Subpoint B is that we'll concede that affect is inevitable, which is terminal defense gets the benefits. They claim about affect the affirmative. Now the framework debate. The framework debate is a question of methods and models of debate. The role of the ballot should be to vote for the team that is best at setting that up. Frame the debate through the topical version of the app. I'm not going to go for any of the political satire arguments, but they could use the 1AC's performance of black humor to advocate for things like the topical version of the app. The United States should establish a minority system that happens post legalization, which allows for licenses to go exclusively to minority business. As a form of reparations. They have dropped this argument, and the one in R, they've conceded that it leads to forms of material changes. Our form of Chatterjee evidence said that actual studies show that it has increased the ratio of minority participants working in actual businesses compared to that of their white contemporaries, which means that it leads to material changes that can change the life of those who participate in the selling of weed, or those who are imprisoned in the sex school, which are material impacts that necessarily need to happen in order for people to even have the chance at survival or survivability in the first place. No one-year argument means that you have to vote. We have to only win a very, very low risk of any of our offense for you to vote negative. If we literally solve the terminal impact to the entirety of the case debate. Now the model of debate, debate. Now Atlantis evidence sets up why our model of debate is good. Subpoint versus our link argument. Their model trades off, but they're all predictable ground. Makes it impossible for us to discuss the affirmative or truth test if we lose access to things like legalization ban, state ban, or topic area ban, which are core generics that we necessarily would have prepared for this topic. This leads to further bad research, which prevent meta-consensus or agreement on certain things, but destroy the productive value of simulation. Now, for piece of trizic evidence, we need some sort of basic rules in order to accept the pluralization of certain forms of identity. It's also a reason to vote negative on presumption because we have no idea whether the 1AC is actually a good idea in the first place. Some would be they concede that stable ground and simulation lead to things like empathy, engagement, and education. It leads us to understand the consequences of certain actions and also understand the minute legal details that are necessary to prevent bureaucratic tinkering that is able to roll back policies in the chat code. Leads to things like empathy, which allows us to understand different points of view from a stable locus of research where we are actually in depth on, which generate certain forms of portable skills. The empathy impact is the reason why we're able to solve materiality within this debate round, because it teaches us the skills that we get here to make actual changes in the real world when we confront these confront problems of anti-blackness or racism in general. They've also considered our one-word impact with an existential impact. Our model of debate necessarily solve things like information overload, decision-making, engagement, etc. not accessible by them because things like lack of preparation destroy our ability to cope with things. This leads to not only solving their impact of things like social justice, but also extinction via environment, which is treated as try or die for the negative. Now they see that prior proves that they are sufficient to solve. No, it just makes it just says that humor may be helpful because it spurred things like racial discussions, which eventually led to racial policy changes, like discussions regarding prison or affirmative action policies. However, still mandates the necessity of why policy engagement is good. That's a piece of MOVE evidence because it says that policies affect material circumstances in the first place. There is no outside to the system we are in the South Coast. We have to learn how to work through it, which is why debate can teach us to, by debate teaching us to engage with the legal minutia is necessarily important because it is a good supplement to humor, because humor is not sufficient in of itself. The next argument is their Parisia, is their Parisia form of argument. This is the answer of the Parisia paper, but it also can be topical. Parisia can be a form of speaking truth to power while also advocating for ways that power should be able to change secret sauce. They say we're the politics for respectability. No, we're not. This is a debate about methodology. So it means that some forms of exclusion are inevitable. However, we never tell them how to speak or how they should act. Rather, why our method may necessarily have better benefits than what the 1AC did. Now they say double consciousness, not a disadvantage to their framework. Just a reason why the performance of the 1AC is good. No reason why a framework interpretation would necessarily exclude that. The final argument they have is accessibility. They have it backwards. Or a piece of Barker evidence is phenomenal. It says it's not a question of access in the status quo, but rather a refusal to engage causes conservatism to thrive in the status quo. Now is the unique time to engage with the prison system specifically, because things like budget concerns, these social ills from prisons not actually solving these problems, etc., cause people to question the legitimacy of the prison system. So, meaning that speaking truth to power can be effective, and the accessibility things also means you vote negative on presumption, because if politics is inevitably not accessible, then there's no risk that the affirmative is actually able to change something, which means you vote negative. Now, the Parisha plays the framework debate largely solves all of this. They can tell white folks that the system is fucked up, that's fine, and solve their changes in debates. There's no reason why we preclude any changes in debate. However, we still say that our form of resisting authoritarianism via institutional politics is still a necessary form of resistance. That's what Rita Smith evidence. It says that we need that alternate spaces don't exist. So using the spaces of politics is necessary in order to dismantle things like anti-blackness. Also, our survival strategy argument is impact, and therefore individualist survival strategy is bad because it forces us to cope with things like neoliberalism, which so marginalizes people in the status quo. Rather, we need collective strategies in order to change the way that material politics affect those the lowest common denominator to make it less bad.
240, I'll start. You got all this.
How many hours?
Don't eat that shit.
That's just that's what's working.
That's what-
You can have it. That's double punch. That's all. Over to you right now. It's like big it's like reparations. It's a T version of the other. I don't want to know that's T. It's not touching. So you look at the picture from Stinky.
Oh yeah, he would.
It looks just like him, no? This is right here in the heart. Okay, it's not practice. Just think about life.
So somebody from our team was watching the live stream, and then they just posted in our like debate Facebook group just a picture of Stinky.
Absolutely right there.
That's what I like to see.
Get in
right
there. Get in there.
Get in there.
Shout out to Stanley.
That's good, man.
We got it.
What are you talking about your ears too?
Yeah, they've all been talking about that.
Cool.
They like you. They like you.
What's the favorite joke? Was it the lead to the left? Tell me what's happening in Somalia?
I don't know.
That was a good one.
Yo,
Was it that you could hear RFD at the first crossing? That was a good one. That was a good one too.
I don't know. We should get them to vote on it.
Yeah, ask them. Be like, what?
wait, we gotta think of some fucked up shit to like kill his shit to take the steam off him. Stacks.
Steam off of who?
Stack. Take the steam off of Stinky. You know, he got fumes raising, but
I'm sorry, I'm looking at you like this, but I gotta look at you. You kind of look like the mouse from Ratatouille. If you
Yo, ain't nobody wore pleats since the movie American Psycho came out.
Hey, I got somebody watching that's not a debater.
Hey, it's the government.
No.
Kim Jong-il gonna be like, bring me him.
Bring me in.
Bring that organ here. But nah, that shit fucked up. I had to kill you.
Son, the mouse from Ratatouille was enough, son.
Nah.
Yes, it is, son. Every mouse would think of Speedy Gonzalez.
Oh shit. That's how acceptable. Acceptable.
Like the mouse that got squished for the basketball in Space Jam. Yeah, a little bit.
Oh my god.
Right? No, but I'm speaking anyway. Case. It would be fine if I just collapse the party shit down on the case, right? I'm gonna do that. Case and framework. Okay.
Are you ready?
Before I get to this debate shit, Devon's so fat, any shirt he wears look automatically ironed. And also, they are dropping the accessibility arguments that their mode of debate is particularly excludes for black people who do not want to conform to the policies of respectability that I say as being good for the future debate. I think that Shamir Evans is fire on this question, saying that there are particular, especially what was saying, there are particular sections of black folks who are turned off from engaging in the debate community because they are imposed. They have like white standards that are colorblind imposed upon them, which means that they exclude. They're excluded. They do not allow for black folks to engage within debate rounds, and especially when one of the main articulations to why party is good is that it allows for community building. You need to be especially what's the name? Suspicious of a round when they endorse a form of a topical version that is apparently solves for forms of anti-blackness but excludes black people. I think that this is something that you need to project on face value. Now, also, they dropped throughout the entire debate the double conscience argument. We said, cross-sex from the articulation that we gave around. We said specifically that our methodology does not exclude them, but theirs excludes us. The double conscience argument is that we need to have ways of shifting in and out of what is seen as being normal and having authentically black modes of expression. Maybe they didn't see this as a permutation, but I think it was pretty clear saying that these things are not mutually exclusive. If there is any risk that there is room for double conscience, that means that you vote AF, because the AF always allows for the political engagement that they talk about, but they always exclude us. This is a block argument throughout the entire round. You sign here, ballot here, and also they are dropping the respectability politics argument, the respectability argument there, claim for argumentation being made intelligible by having a topical version to say why we need to get in the form of politics that is essentially colorblind, excludes the fact that there are different modes of engagement with the political. I think that a great example of this is the Black Party, which was something that was made earlier. And sure, it was rooted in comedy, but there was a position in that movie where there was a person that got on stage to say free asylum and all political prisoners. There was a way that we can use comedy as a mode of community building that allows us to engage in the political without being so fixated on how we need to acclimate ourselves to the state. Instead, we need to be able to speak to the we need to be able to speak to the state, which is why there is an inauthenticity. This that would drop to their entire methodology. The divine was very clear in this argument, saying that Parisha is not speaking as power, but speaking truth to power. The distinction here they dropped this argument, but I think it's actually a pretty good reason as to why their methodology excludes solvency. The only articulation they had is why a black comedy can be used in this instance was a white immigrant, was a white Irish man named Stephen Colbert what happened was like there was an example where he actually engaged in Congress, but the thing was that comedy was one really horrible, and secondly nobody took that shit seriously. That's because he was trying to speak truth as a position of power, which means that he became a tool of the kind of people to start about how bad of politics would actually be. We can only be Parisians insofar as we speak truth to power and recognize the danger that comes with that speech act. The idea that we need to have a topical version can never solve a argument because it is always a safe position that never takes into account the fact of risk that comes with speaking truth. When I realized that, when we as debaters realize that we are being on the public eye, chances are somebody told Kim Jong-il about this shit that I said in the 1AC. That's fucked up. If I gave a popular word to the app, I just talked merely about reparations. That's nothing more than a repetition of the same colorblind politics that the 1AC indicts. I think I gave a pretty good example now just by talking about how we can use the law to change it, ignoring the fact that the legal institutions in themselves are colorblind, and it's only our Patriotic Act that speaks outside in order to speak to and is willing to embrace the danger that comes with that speech act and our authentic relationship to the truth is the only way that we can solve for these things that are isolated within this debate ground. Also, they have no impact. They might spend this card that says that like deliberative debate is key to solving all existential crises, but I think my examples were damning. The evidence says that the topic does not matter as long as people are able to produce this research, that they're able to solve all that shit. I think we had pretty good arguments as to how our method actually allows us to mean that we also access this solvency for existential crisis, mean that we are controlling the impact of the debate. And also, the prior example showed that humor can be helpful. Policy engagement is good. The prior showed that our relationship to the humanistic engagement with the law is good because it allows us. It is an example of like low theory that allows us to think about the world around us. I think that's the Jonathan 86 card that says specifically how using humor to interrogate the law is good. How is this not what we've been doing from the very beginning? It is our use of humor itself that is inherently political, and they've had no offense on this round. The only reason you vote for them is if we exclude their mode of debate, but because of the double conscience, because of the Johnson 86 card, because of things like the HBS Block Party, which allows us to re-envision the mode of the political that allows for people to speak truth to power without the fear of the state crushing us down, allows us to express agency in a way to speak truth. That is much better. It is the only way to access education. It is the only way to access political selectivity that is not so fearful that we see our ability to speak truth to the fear of totalitarianism. This means that you always prefer the affirmative in this debate round.
They say the Barker evidence says that the refusal to engage causes the impact. No, it's like the debate itself. It refuses to.
It is the preclusion of black debaters within the debate round that leads to the impacts they talk about. I think that the Brinkley evidence is pretty clear on this. And if you don't like that, the example of how their normative methods of debate are leaning towards argumentative strategies that explicitly are coded to say this means that we don't have to vote for you black people. Now, I think a good example of this was the Randall example.
Good.